a civil rights activist who is a civil rights activist, political analyst, columnist, and the author of several books. He has had a long association with people's struggles, spanning over 3 decades. He has an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and a PhD from University of Mumbai. He was a senior professor and chair of Big Data Analytics at Goa Institute of Management and was a Petronet India professor at IIT Kharagpur. His recent books are Dalits Past, Present, Future, Persistence of Caste, Anti-Imperialism and Annihilation of Caste, Republic of Caste, among several. He's a long-time opponent of Hindutva forces and was incarcerated by India's right-wing government in 2020 on charges that are fabricated until he was released on bail 2 years ago. His new book, that is available for purchasing on Amazon from October 8, is a biography of Dr. Ambedkar's titled Iconoclast, Reflective Biography of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Sukanya Shanta, who was supposed to join us as our second speaker, could not join us because she had to immediately travel to report and write about a gruesome custodial death in Madhya Pradesh. But in her place, joining with us today is a good friend of mine and an inspiration to my PhD work, Bellapu Anuradha. Anuradha is a civil rights activist from Andhra Pradesh. She worked with several organizations doing grassroots activism for democracy and better welfare, such as the Andhra Pradesh Civil Liberties Committee and Chaitya Mahila Sangam. In 2009, she was arrested and sent to Hazaribagh jail in Jharkhand. The prison stories she has written from jail have been published in Telugu newspapers and publications such as Andhra Jyoti and Revolutionary Writers Associations. Her stories were translated into Hindi and a few into Bengali. I had a good fortune of reviewing her book titled Prison Notes of a Woman Activist, which is a translation of these Telugu stories into English. She is currently working on translating stories of those at the receiving end of oppressive police and prison system in a website that you should definitely check out, vasantamegam.com. Khalid Ansari, our third speaker, is a sociologist interested in post-colonial modernity, democratic deepening, anti-caste movements, and transformative politics in general. Khalid acquired his PhD from University of Humanistic Studies, the Netherlands. He is currently teaching at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. Khalid advocates and engages passionately with democratic social movements. He has published and lectured widely in reputed academic and popular spaces. Khalid is on the advisory board of Hindus for Human Rights. For a long time, caste as a category was never at the center of understanding issues in academic writing or in conducting politics in independent India. Later, caste was elevated to be the categorical frame of understanding, almost always neglecting the intersections of class and gender. Anand Teltumbde is one scholar who actively wrote against the issues with traditional left politics, which has the class-only framework, and the emerging Bahujan politics with a caste-only framework. His scholarship seeks to unite the useful threads from both kinds of politics and academic writing that would ultimately address the issue of annihilation of caste. Today's panel introduces you to understanding caste in an era of neoliberalism and Hindutva in India, but it also takes you through those spaces that are invisibilized by state, like the prisons. Anuradha, through her personal experiences, will take us through these spaces that are closed off from public view and exposes us to the long tentacled caste system that penetrated the spaces that one cannot even see. Similarly, Dr. Ansari will highlight upon the caste system that is prevalent amongst Indian Muslims, a religion that we may comfortably believe does not practice caste. The order of lectures would be first Anand Teltumbde, and then Anu, and then Dr. Ansari. Each speaker gets about 20 minutes to deliver their lecture, and following all the lectures, we will open the floor for questions. Those joining us online can send the questions in chat box, and one of us will read them. While asking questions, the simple trick is to be respectful, and any nuisance, unfortunately, will not be tolerated. Before we formally begin the discussion, we would like to announce that Progressive South Asia Collective stands in solidarity with Palestine and strongly condemns the Israeli genocide. I now request Dr. Teltumbde to please begin the lecture on caste and neoliberal Hindutva.
Thank you, Vinchika. Well, I'll start with caste and neoliberal Hindutva, as I was advised to speak on. neoliberal Hindutva is a loaded term and may need some clarity because rhetorically it is spoken, but probably it does not mean the same thing to all people. So it demands some basic understanding of these two terms, neoliberal and Hindutva. Neoliberal stems from neoliberalism as an economic philosophy that promotes free market capitalism, deregulation, privatization, and reduced government intervention in the economy. It prioritizes individual freedom, particularly economic freedom, and emphasizes the efficiency of markets to distribute resources. The belief is that limited state interference allows for more efficient economic outcomes. Hindutva does not have anything to do with religion as such. It is a camouflage for fascist aspirations of a section of historically dominant castes. What is then fascism? Fascism is an authoritarian nationalist ideology that emphasizes the supremacy of the state, often placing a strong leader or a dictatorial regime at the center. It advocates for centralized control, suppression of dissent, and often seeks to homogenize society based on race, ethnicity, or nationality. Fascism prioritizes collective unity and national identity over individual freedom with a focus on militarism and expansion. Caste, cultural nationalism, anti-liberalism, anti-secularism, etc., have become the arsenal in the hands of fascist forces. Thus, the ruling Hindutva movement in India under the BJP can be characterized as a fusion of both fascist and neoliberal elements, aptly referred to as neoliberal Hindutva. This hybrid ideology combines the authoritarian ultranationalist aspects of Hindutva with the market-driven policies of neoliberalism, creating a political and economic environment that is unique to contemporary India. Neoliberal Hindutva represents the BJP's political strategy that combines neoliberal economic policy with Hindutva's cultural agenda, while neoliberalism exacerbates economic inequalities and privatizes public resources. The fascist Hindutva agenda uses religion and nationalism to obscure caste contradictions and solidify political control. Both fascism and neoliberalism deeply affect caste dynamics in India, albeit in different ways. Fascism manipulates caste hierarchies by promoting a homogenized Hindu identity, often reinforcing upper caste dominance while co-opting marginal castes. Neoliberalism, meanwhile, exacerbates economic inequalities and erodes social safety nets that could help lower castes, further marginalizing them. Together, these ideologies create a system where caste oppression is both subtly reinforced and politically manipulated, undermining genuine caste-based social justice. How do or how does neoliberal Hindutva impact caste? The impact of neoliberal Hindutva may be discerned in terms of how its two constituents, that is fascism and neoliberalism, impact caste dynamics in India in distinct but overlapping ways, especially given India's complex social structure and history of caste-based oppression. Each ideology influences caste relations, political strategies, and socio-economic outcomes, shaping how caste identity is experienced and manipulated in contemporary India. We may see now how fascism and neoliberalism individually impact caste in India. Fascism's impact on caste in India. Uh, in India, fascism, especially in its Hindutva form, seeks to create a homogenized Hindu national identity. This ideology often obscures internal caste differences while attempting to co-opt various caste groups into the broader framework of Hindu nationalism. Fascism's impact may be mapped in two ways. One, Hindutva and caste hierarchies, and two, fascist manipulation of caste narratives. Under the first, I see four components of strategy in play. One, caste suppression for national unity. Two, co-option of OBCs and Dalits. Three, caste violence and polarization. And four, social engineering through religion. Now, I would touch upon one by one briefly as to what it means. One, caste suppression for national unity. Hindutva-based fascism aims to transcend caste divisions, at least rhetorically, by promoting a unified Hindu identity. However, this unity often masks the reality of entrenched caste hierarchies. The caste system is neither dismantled nor directly challenged. Instead, lower castes are sometimes incorporated into Hindu narratives, but without challenging the upper caste dominance that historically defines Hinduism. It is embodied in RSS conception of Samarasata, which is harmony and not equality. Two, co-option of OBCs and Dalits. Fascist politics in India often attempts to incorporate marginalized groups such as the OBCs and even Dalits into the national agenda, nationalistic agenda. The BJP, for instance, has strategically aligned itself with dominant OBC groups and tried to appear Dalit by invoking historical figures like B.R. Ambedkar. However, this outreach tends to be symbolic as the caste hierarchies remain largely intact and the underlying Brahminical dominance is rarely contested. Three, caste violence and polarization. At times, fascist forces in India, particularly Hindutva organizations, exacerbate caste-based violence, lynchings, caste atrocities, and the brutal suppression of Dalit movements are often downplayed, dismissed, or ignored by right-wing groups, while caste-based vigilante violence is encouraged or tolerated when it serves the broader goals of Hindu unity and upper caste dominance. Four, social engineering through religion. Hindutva's caste approach tends to gloss over caste oppression, focusing on religious identity to align even lower caste Hindus against Muslims and Christians. This tactic fosters religious solidarity that often strengthens Brahminical social hierarchies within the Hindu fold. Under the second component, that is fascist manipulation of caste narratives, it impacts caste in two ways. One, marginalization of Dalit politics. Fascist ideologies in India often aim to dilute or co-opt Dalit political movements, especially those aligned with Ambedkarite thought, which is fundamentally anti-caste and oppose the Hindu hierarchical structure. By attempting to align Dalit with Hindutva fascist forces, undermine Dalit autonomy and their struggle for social justice. Two, opposition to caste census. The BJP, while publicly championing the OBC cause, has been ambivalent or outright opposed to caste-based census. This is because revealing the true sense of marginalized caste could challenge the existing power structure within the Hindu framework, which is dominated by upper caste elites. Of late, both BJP as well as RSS were compelled to accept it. Ultimately, it all depends on what the caste census would contain and thereafter how it is analyzed and used. Next, neoliberalism impact on caste. Neoliberalism in India, particularly since the liberalization of the economy in the 1990s, has had profound impact on caste dynamics, largely through its emphasis on privatization, deregulation, and market-driven policies. While neoliberalism champions individual merit and economic efficiency, its impact on marginalized caste groups is often inequitable. Its impact may be mapped along three components. First, economic inequality and caste. Second, commodification of caste. And third, privatization and decline of social welfare. We will take one by one. Economic inequality and caste. It has widening caste-based economic disparities. Neoliberalism's focus on free market policies has led to greater economic inequality, disproportionately affecting Dalits, Adivasis, and other marginalized castes who historically lacked access to education, resources, and capital. Economic liberalization benefited the upper caste more as they had the cultural capital, social networks, and resources to exploit new opportunities, leaving many more lower castes further behind. Next, erosion of public sector and affirmative action. The privatization of industries and services under neoliberalism has undermined the reservation system in India. Public sector jobs where affirmative action policies provided some upward mobility for SCs, STs, and OBCs have dwindled, while the private sector, driven by profit, often bypasses the social justice measures. The lack of affirmative action in the private sector has excluded lower castes from many of the benefits neoliberal growth. However, it is not the reservation in private sector that constitutes the solution, as the dominant section of Ambedkarite Dalits once believed. BJP government has nearly illegitimized the caste-based reservation by ceding the ideas PWS reservation, economic weaker section reservations, and the lateral entry scheme. The practical erosion of spaces of public employment actually makes reservation irrelevant. Next, caste and education inequality. Neoliberal reforms in education, such as privatization and the growth of elite private institutions, have created barriers for marginalized castes. As public education is underfunded and access to quality private education becomes limited to those who can afford it, lower caste groups face greater difficulties in achieving upward mobility through education. The contraction in public sector jobs and meaningful education getting out of the reach of Dalit face the prospects of illiteracy in future. The second component, as I mentioned, was the commodification of caste. Underneath, probably 2 points we would discuss: market-driven caste identities. Neoliberalism, while outwardly promoting individualism and meritocracy, often allows caste to be subtly reinforced in the private sphere. Caste-based networks continue to play a significant role in business and employment, especially in small and medium-sized enterprises, where caste solidarity can translate into economic opportunity. Second is exploitation of informal labor. A large proportion of Dalits and lower caste work in the informal sector, which has expanded under neoliberalism. This sector lacks regulation, labor rights, and protections, leading to further exploitation of caste-based labor. Informal workers such as manual scavengers and agricultural laborers remain outside the scope of neoliberal reforms, reinforcing caste inequalities in the economy. Third component was privatization and the decline of social welfare. Underneath, first is the erosion of the welfare state. Neoliberal policies have led to a reduction in social welfare programs, disproportionately harming marginalized castes that relied on government schemes for education, healthcare, and economic support. The rolling back of the state in providing basic services has widened the gap between upper and lower castes, as the wealthy, often from upper caste backgrounds, can afford private alternatives. Second, caste and urbanization. Neoliberal urbanization has also led to the displacement of Dalits and marginalized communities from their traditional livelihood and lands. The growth of cities, driven by real estate and infrastructure projects, often involves the possible eviction of slum dwellers and landless laborers, many of whom are from lower castes. This further entrenches their social economic marginalization. In conclusion, both fascism and neoliberalism deeply affect caste dynamics in India, albeit in different ways. Fascism manipulates caste hierarchies by promoting a homogenized Hindu identity, often reinforcing upper caste dominance while co-opting marginalized castes. Neoliberalism, meanwhile, exacerbates economic inequalities and erodes social safety nets that could help lower castes, further marginalizing them. Together, these ideologies create a system where caste oppression is both subtly reinforced and politically manipulated, undermining genuine caste-based social justice. I would end here and look forward to questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Teltumbde. Now I would request Anuradha to speak, and then we can have questions towards the end after Khalid Ansari speaks. Anuradha, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay.
Hello. Am I audible? Hello, Vipanchika, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
So am I visible?
No, we cannot see your video.
Just give me a second. I'm just trying to.
Anuradha, you're muted, just so you know.
Thank you, Vipanchika. I'm extremely sorry for not being able to show my face. I don't know how, some technical mistake I'm making. But thank you, Vipanchika, for just selecting this very topic, because the very less spoken topic is about prisons. And I thank Sukanya Shanta also for doing a commendable job on caste discrimination that is existing in prisons. Hello, Vipanchika, am I audible?
Yeah, Anuradha, you are audible.
Thank you. So actually, Sukanya has done a commendable job. She actually gathered all the jail manuals, which are usually not available for the prisoners, and she located where it is explicitly written about, allotting work on the lines of caste and many other things. And she recently lodged a bill also in the Supreme Court of India. And in that she mentioned that 11 states actually have explicitly written in their manuals, which are discriminatory on the lines of caste. And I actually stayed in Jharkhand, and it is one of those 11 states. So my stay was during 2009 and 2013, and nearly I spent 4 years. And also during 2019 and 20, I stayed in one of the jails in Telangana, that is in the women's prison, in special women's prison in Hyderabad. So I can take these two experiences to say a few things about how caste is operating in jails. Actually, it is a reflection of the outside society, but much more cruelly implemented. And the word inside the prisons is very small. So the repercussions and the consequences of its operation also is experienced in very, intensely most of the times. The first thing, actually, even Sukanya said this, which is too obvious, like the allotment of labor. Usually the convicted prisoners are allotted usually the convicted prisoners are allowed, if they belong to the higher caste, they are allotted the kitchen work, like cutting the vegetables or cooking, or anything related to that. And if a person is a barber, he is allotted that work. And if they belong to oppressed caste, they are given the menial jobs of cleaning. And usually, actually, in Jharkhand, the scavenging work is done by the people, those are coming from outside. And usually, not usually, it is 100% they belong to the oppressed caste only. And also, even in women's barrack, we don't have cooking part. Women's barrack is actually, it's not actually a special jail. It's only part of the central prison. So it is one barrack we have. In that, actually, cooking is not done. And the main cooking is done in the central prison on the gents side, and it is sent to the women's prison. So all the women who work there will get only the cleaning job usually. So no cutting vegetables and all that. But there, actually, so it's not actually allotted according to their, caste, but caste operate in different angles. Like, for example, I want to just share a few incidents. Through that, you can understand how it all happened. Like one prisoner, one day she had a visitor, but she was not allowed to have her interview. And she was crying, and I just inquired into the matter, and the head warder told me that the person who came to visit her has a different title. That means he is not the same caste as this person. So how can he be a relative? That's why the interview is not given. So I was so surprised. Intercaste marriages are so common nowadays, and my husband also won't belong to the caste I belong to. So do you think we are not related because our castes are different? So your case is different, immediately he said, because I'm a political prisoner. So that is how they treat. I told her, see, she can, I mean, that is not written anywhere, that a person is not entitled to meet if the castes are different. So when we talk about the manual, usually the same thing they also say, the manual is ages old. Like it was written during the British time, and we only can't have the copy here, and it is difficult to implement those rules now. So, which is a fact actually. So sometimes even if things are changed, a circular will be issued to the jails, and usually it won't be incorporated in the manual because they never print the manual. We could hardly get a manual because we have to fight a lot to get a manual. And I was pretty shocked to see certain words in that. If the person is, if the person belongs to so and so caste, he can be given this work, like cooking and all. If a person is a Brahmin, or when the Brahmin is not available, if any upper caste people are there, you can give cooking jobs. And if any Brahmin demands to cook privately, they should be given rations. So like all these special treatment is also allowed, and in writing. And without that also, even if it is not written in the manual also, so many things operate like this only. And actually I was surprised to know through Sukanya's article only, which she has written in Wire, that in Tamil Nadu, in one of the central prisons, the barracks are maintained caste-wise, like Tewar's barrack, like that. Even in Bihar and Jharkhand also, certain, like they are not written that way, but it is practiced that way. Suppose Rajput is there. I usually see this happen like this. If any new prisoner is entering the prison, everybody will just storm the gates, and I'll be waiting. And the first thing that is asked is for their title. If any person just tell their name as Deepak or Anuradha, they'll ask for the title. That is how it is. A title is actually, we in South India say surnames, but there it's title, and usually the title denotes the caste. And if they're a little bit confused about their caste, they will directly ask the next question, which caste you belong to. Sometimes it is first question itself will be to what caste you belong. And immediately the prisoners belonging to the same caste will just take him, come with us, and they all go and stay in one place. Or sometimes even Bhumihars, they have their barrack. Bihar. It is not written that way, but it happens that way. And also one Adivasi girl who happened to marry a Muslim. I actually wrote about the story in my prison notes. Identity, Pehchan is the title of that. Actually, she actually came to the jail, and she learned that she is pregnant. And after that, she delivered the baby, and the hospital people, the jail people only have sent her out to the government hospital to have her delivery. And she came back with the kid. And later on, she asked me to write her a petition for the birth certificate of the child. So when I wrote the petition and sent it through the head warder, he came back and said, see, your intentions are good, you want to help people, but why are you helping these people? So what people? Then he said, see, they are not actually married. So why are you helping them? I said, how do you know that they are not married? See, because she married a Muslim man, immediately this person is very judgmental. Then I asked him one question. Have you seen me marrying my husband? Have you seen a marriage? So how do you know that he is my husband? They said, no, your case is different. I said, how is it different? Whether it is for a political prisoner or for an ordinary prisoner, the proof they have is the warrant with which the prisoner enters the jail. So in that warrant, it is written, Anuradha and wife of so and so or daughter of so and so. With that only anybody will know. So husband's name is written on the warrant, and through that only they will know. So then I asked him, how did you send her to the hospital? So whose name have you written? So when she's going for delivery, definitely they will ask who the husband is, and it is written in the warrant, and same thing they will write and send. So how can you say this? She definitely has the right to get the certificate, and whoever is mentioned as her husband is naturally her father. And you can't say that she cannot have. So, and how he is judging depending on the person's religion. Like that, it happens. And he happened to be a Brahmin also, that head warder. But my observation, and also our friends who were in jail, like Arun Ferreira, my good friend, and also accused in Bhima Koregam and co-accused of our Anand. Once he actually has done so many cartoons on prison life, and in which he even took the topic of caste. And his observation is, in jail, another angle also is there, how it operates. Like, jail authorities, they actually are the, they behave in a Brahminical way. They need not be Brahmins. The superintendent may be, actually in Jharkhand, the superintendent is, BC caste, and even the jailer also, he also belongs to a BC caste. But see, there are certain, like when the superintendent arrives at the jail, there is a, what do you call, a parade-like thing, that saluting. So all the security personnel will stand in line on the either side of the walls, and he will enter like a Maharaja, And at that time, no prisoner is expected to be in that, in that space. Like, we all should just vanish. Sir is coming, like that. So, in a way, the authorities act like they are the, upper caste or Brahmins, and all the prisoners are treated as untouchables. I repeat, untouchables. Whether it is for anything, they won't touch. Even the doctors, if when we have a fever or anything, they never touch the patient. If anybody have a wound or needs a bandage and all those things are done by other convicted prisoners who are actually working in that particular medical department. But the doctor never touches. Nothing. They will just, and they spell it out, suppose some prisoner comes forward to speak, a step aside, they say, like that. They just order. They want always to keep the distance. We should not go into the vicinity of the jail authorities. This I have seen in every, with the each and every jail official behaves that way, and doctors especially. And actually, my second stint in the prison was in Hyderabad, and during COVID. So COVID actually helped, I think, it solidified this situation, like the practices and all. In a way, they justified that COVID situation actually justified all this. So people more loudly used to say, stand away, don't touch this, don't touch that, all sorts of things. And one more thing, this pill and all, it's really a good first step, because somewhere the change should start. But in prisons, usually they won't go by the rule book. Whatever that exists in their mind, that mindset, that only actually works. In Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, there are several social reform movements, and at any given point of time in jails you see political prisoners, so many Naxalite prisoners, and or ML group people, or activists, or mass organization activists, human rights activists. So usually their number is significant in AP and Telangana, and several struggles took place in the jails of AP, and especially in United Andhra Pradesh. So it's a little bit different here. But still, when I was in Hyderabad special women prison, the superintendent is from a scheduled tribe, and the jailer, deputy is from scheduled caste. But still, they are not as hard as that, but a little bit democratic, and still they like to exercise power, but not in subtle ways. The superintendent always used to address the rest of the prisoners as how do I say, that in Telugu actually is a derogatory. When you speak to others in that way, it is very derogatory. That happens only outside in the society. Dalits are addressed that way, or people who do menial jobs, or those who belong to the oppressed caste and class are addressed that way by the upper caste people or upper class people. So here also the same thing. All the prisoners except for political prisoners, she used to address them that way. So in such angles, I could see how they want to exercise their power. So even there also this type of practices are there, but relatively very less. And these jobs, menial jobs, are done on rotation basis, so everybody gets. But upper caste people, some people, they try to negotiate and somehow manage to escape such type of jobs. So those jobs are given to others in the name of punishments. Like one girl belonging to a Muslim community from Bangladesh, and foreigners are actually given special quota of food, and like they have some special status according to the manual. So when other people from say some prisoners are from Africa and some prisoners are from Philippines, like that, so they are given that special food and all. So this Bangladeshi girl also, she said, even I am a foreigner, so why can't I have that special status and special food? So just for asking that, she was given punishment of doing some menial jobs, and she is not even a convict prisoner. She is under trial, and she should not be given that work. But as a punishment, she was given. That is only for asking her right. So such things also happen. And there actually, they won't say like Muslim barrack or something, but that is polishedly said Hindi speaking. So here actually Hindi speaking people are very less, and usually most of them are from Muslim community, because they speak Urdu, that is actually taken for granted as Hindi speaking, and just they are kept in one barrack. So like that also prisoners are segregated. And people who come from on corruption charges, ACB and all, who actually are of upper caste or whatever caste, but they are treated especially given a special barrack and all. And so in that, the friendships and all, you can see, so all upper caste people move together. So in subtle ways, actually, it is expressed. So I feel that wherever the states are very backward, even in general. So the prisons also have more, explicit ways of segregating prisoners on the lines of caste. And where there are social reform movements and all, a lot of activity outside the prison in the society in general, there actually it is a little bit less, more in subtler ways. So that's how I think it operates. And actually, now that Sukanya has filed the public interest litigation, so people are talking about it. And actually, I think everybody should read her articles in The Wire. Yeah, and you will find very shocking information in that, how actually these prisons are actually practicing caste. And 1894, during that colonial period, the prison manual of 1894 is still followed actually. And after that, some changes were then during 1950, but definitely a fresh manual is not written. So when we demand anything, or when we question any discrimination that is practiced in a prison, then they say, sometimes to defend themselves, they say that it is like that in that manual. And sometimes to defend themselves, they say, because it is not written in the manual, we can't do it, we can't change it, like that. So now I don't know, the judgment is reserved, it is not given, but even a fresh manual is written, and even in that, if they write that no discrimination should be shown in prisons, it will take so many years, for that to come into practice. Because unless unless the caste system is dealt on the whole in the society and some changes are taking place, it can't reflect in prisons, because that is the last place where any change can take place. Because prisons are actually, they are calling now correctional homes, where actually there is no chance of a person to get corrected. Actually that type of ill treatment, and usually the authorities in their mind have this mindset that if the prisoners are treated cruelly or meted out harsh treatment, then only they will rectify themselves. Because a prisoner should not have any rights, then only they won't come again. So this type of mindset is there in the authorities. That's what even our superintendent always used to tell me. See, if we give them all these rights, they will happily stay forever in the prison. So if we have to reduce the crime rate, or want to bring about change in the prisoners' mindset, we have to treat them like this. Otherwise, if we treat them as equals, if we treat them as humans, like, they tend to come time and again. So that is their mindset. So it's only a first step, I can say, that if any changes come in the manuals, that is only a first step, and we have a lot to happen actually for any change. Thanks, Vipanchika, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much. We will now request Dr. Ansari to please give his lecture.
Yeah, am I audible?
Very much, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so if the logic of democracy means widening of freedoms, widening of liberties, and restriction of inequalities in all sectors of life, then one of the critical insights of Dr. Ambedkar is that the caste order militates against this logic of democracy. And if we are to have a robust democratic society and system, then it can only be premised on the annihilation of caste. So I'll begin with this insight of Baba Sahib and try to discuss how caste works among Muslims in India and South Asia much more broadly. So caste is a storehouse of power in South Asia that broadly cuts across religions. But because of the colonial and Orientalist intervention in terms of knowledge, in terms of governance strategies, there were certain logics, conceptual logics, governance logics, installed during the colonial Orientalist regime, which shape anti-caste thought and anti-caste politics till today. Now, if we look at those logics, then there are three broad logics which were installed during the colonial period. One is religion was elevated as the overarching identity to access South Asia. Second, caste was launched as an internal moment of Hinduism, and caste in other communities like Christianity and Islam, it was seen as a residual category which can be eclipsed with subsequent Islamization or Christianization. Third, Islam was framed as an intolerant but egalitarian tradition, and Hinduism was framed as a tolerant but inegalitarian tradition. Now, these three logics, which were installed in the colonial period, they still dictate much of our anti-caste discourse and politics. And one of the points and one of the struggles of the anti-caste mobilization within Muslims is to challenge this conceptual and political framework. So when we come to the sociological description of Islam or Muslim societies in South Asia, then there is a distinction between immigrant Muslims, those who migrated in historical time from West Asia, Central Asia, or Afghanistan, Iran, and so on. So these immigrant Muslims in historical time, they are known as the Ashraf sections or the privileged upper caste Muslims. And the castes, the jatis in these groups are the Sayyids, the Pathans, the Mughals, the Sheikhs, and a few local native upper caste Hindus who converted into Islam. So that forms the first status group, which is that of Ashrafs, which are the elite upper caste Muslims. Now, when we come to the native Muslims, there are three broad categories. One is that of backward Muslims, which are labeled as Ajilaf. Backward Muslims include mostly the artisans and the peasant communities within the Muslims. The second group among the native Muslims is that of Dalit Muslims. So they historically converted from untouchable caste like Lal Begis, Halal Khors, who still practice scavenging and so on. The third group is that of the Adivasi Muslims, the nomadic tribes, and the denotified DNTs. So which include Van Gujars, Bhil Muslims, Gond Muslims, Muslims in Lakshadweep, and so on and so forth. Now, these three categories, the backward Muslims, the Dalit Muslims, and the Adivasi Muslims, they are encompassed within the term Pasmanda. Pasmanda means, it's a Persian term, which means those who have fallen behind. And the term Pasmanda is analogical to the term Bahujan in anti-caste discourse. So Pasmanda includes the lower caste Muslims, the lower tribes Muslims, and they constitute 85% of the Muslim population in India. So if you look at figures, the Muslim population would be around 170 million. And out of this 170 million, 85% are either backward Muslims, Dalit Muslims, or Adivasi Muslims. And the upper caste Muslim, that is the Ashraf, they constitute about 15% of the Muslim population. Now, the Pasmanda Muslim have been struggling against the hegemony of Ashraf or upper caste Muslims within the Muslim political, cultural, and social sphere. And the anti-caste mobilizations are not new. The first wave of Pasmanda anti-caste mobilization was witnessed before independence in the form of the Momin movement, when the lower caste Muslim leaders like Abdul Qayyum Ansari, Asim Bihari, and so on, they challenged the Muslim League movement for partition. They challenged Jinnah's, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's two-nation theory, and they squarely opposed the politics of partition and characterized the All India Muslim League as a party of the Nawabs, aristocrats, and upper caste Muslims. So the first phase, the first wave of anti-caste mobilization within Muslims was in the pre-independence period. The second wave starts from the 1990s in the context of the politics of three M's, the Mandir, the markets, and Mandal. So the Mandal Commission report, it included 82 lower caste Muslims in the OBC list, and that reactivated the anti-caste discourse in the post-1990s period among Muslims. And the Pasmanda term was invented by a journalist, Ali Anwar, who also formed the All India Pasmanda Muslim Mahaz in the 1998 in the state of Bihar. And there are a number of other organizations were formed in Maharashtra, in UP, Bihar, and so on. I won't go into those details. But 1990s is the period when the Pasmanda movement is re-articulating itself. The anti-caste mobilizations in the Muslims, anti-caste Muslim mobilizations, they are being reactivated. Now, anti-caste Pasmanda discourse. The key elements, the discursive strategies of the Pasmanda activists, there are three key themes. One is around identity and culture. Second is around the questions of communal violence and secularism. And third is the question of equity and affirmative action. Those are the three broad themes that the Pasmanda sections, they have contested. In terms of identity and culture, one of the insights from the Pasmanda movement is that the mainstream Muslim culture is basically the Ashrafia culture. It is the culture of the upper caste Muslims, and it devalues and colonizes the life world of the lower caste Pasmanda Muslims. There are four key elements in the Ashrafia culture. One is the Ashrafia culture uses language, Persian, Arabic, and Urdu, as a boundary maintenance mechanism. So Pasmanda argue that their languages are regional. So in Bengal, the Pasmanda Muslims speak Bangla. In Kerala, the Pasmanda Muslims speak Malayalam. In Bhojpur region, the Pasmanda Muslims speak Bhojpuri. So this imposition or this conflation of Urdu as the language of all Muslims is something which the Pasmanda Muslims counter. The second is the question of the Ashrafia culture being anti-labor. The Ashrafia culture is usually a parasitic culture. It does not give any dignity to labor in its cultural practices. Third, there is a reverence of Sayyids as a superior class. So the Sayyids, which are analogical to the Brahmins, they are supposed to be revered and the highest caste among Muslims. And historically, the Islam which has been interpreted in South Asia, it has legitimized the hierarchy within caste and Sayyids as the topmost caste. In the 16th century, during the Mughal period, there was office of Niqabat, which was instituted. And this office of the Niqabat, it used to verify the authenticity of Sayyid claims, the genealogy, and then give them land grants and so on. So this was one of the first instances of reservations where land and other higher positions during the imperial Muslim rule, caste played a role there. And fourth, on the everyday level, the Ashrafia culture or the Ashrafia organizations, they practice discrimination against the lower caste Muslims. And there are many forms that this discrimination takes. There is discrimination inside the mosque in remote locations in UP and Bihar, where lower caste Muslims are forced to pray in the back rows of the mosque. Sometimes for Dalit Muslims, like Lal Begis and Halal Khors, they are separate tumblers kept outside mosque for performing ablution or wuzu, the ritual purification. There are contestations around burial practices. So burial grounds are also casteist. They're based on caste. The surnames of the lower caste Muslims, they are sometimes used as abuses and invectives. There is spatial segregation where the neighborhood where the weavers live or where the Lal Begis live or where the Jogis, the mendicants live, they can be very clearly marked out from the upper caste Ashraf neighborhoods. There is also instances of spectacular violence organized by the upper caste henchmen against intercaste love marriages, against the aspiration of some lower caste during panchayat elections. If there's contest for elections, there is often violence to subdue them, to suppress their voices. So that is the first theme, where the Pasmanda Muslims, they challenge the mainstream Muslim culture as a Shafia culture and challenge the key elements and the interpretations of Islam, which have been produced in South Asia, which are extremely casteist. And the term used is Manu Mullah by many Pasmanda ideologues. So they are clearly deconstructing the South Asian Islam as casteist, as legitimizing graded inequality within South Asian Islam. Now, the second important theme is that of communal violence. There has been a long history of interreligious communal violence in India, especially in the later part of the colonial rule. So the Pasmanda Muslims have 2 or 3 things to say on the question of secularism and communal violence. One, they view communal discourse, whether Hindutva or Islamist variety, whether right-wing Hinduism or right-wing Islam, as an elite strategy, elite instrument to divide the people on religious lines and suppress and displace the aspirations of social justice of 85% of lower caste sections in India across religions, whether they are farmers, whether they are peasants, whether they are the laboring class, the unorganized sector workers, most of these, or the artisans, most of these are OBCs, SCs, and STs across religions. And communal violence is seen as a key intervention by the India's ruling elite, the right wing, to displace the social justice aspirations of these lower caste sections, which constitute a majority of India's population. The second insight is that most of the victims of mob lynching, of communal riots, are usually the lower caste Muslims because of the spatial location. Most of the poor Muslims, most of the riots happen against against poor people who are inhabiting slums. And there is a strong correlation between caste and class in India. So in that sense, violence cannot be seen as monolithic. The violence experienced by Muslims is also differential. Most of the victims are lower caste Muslims because caste and class distribution of vulnerability. And there is also another point which the Pasmanda discourse makes. It is that while the actual victims, most of the victims are the Pasmanda Muslims, those who represent or those who talk about communalism in the public sphere, the academics, the civil society activists, and so on, are usually from the Ashraf and elite Duija caste. So in that sense, while the victims are the Pasmanda and the lower caste, The entrepreneurs of Muslim victimhood, the secular entrepreneurs, they are usually upper caste sections. And the third insight is that majority and minority communalism, they are intertwined, they are symbiotic, they constitute each other. Hindu fundamentalism is not possible without Muslim fundamentalism. So if we have to fight communalism, then we have to fight both Hindu and Muslim communalism together. Because Hindu fundamentalism basically draws its energy, its fuel from the Hindu communal voices. So in that sense, if we are serious, if the left liberal and democratic voices, they are serious in fighting communalism, it has to be an all-out war against Hindu fundamentalism and Muslim fundamentalism simultaneously. So that is on communalism. I think there's only 4 minutes left, so I won't go into details on secularism. The last theme that the Pasmanda Muslims struggle with are the questions around equity. So in that sense, there is a realization that the neoliberal economic system, it works against 85% of Pasmanda Muslims as it does against the lower castes in any community. And they challenge the neoliberal economic model. In terms of reservations, affirmative action, they are seeking categorical revisions in SC, ST, and OBC, not on religious lines, but that similarly placed lower caste Muslim Dalits, Muslim Adivasis, and Muslim backward caste. They must be judicially accommodated in the existing categories on the basis of their caste location, not on the basis of religion. Pasmanda Muslims have always challenged an overarching Muslim quota, which they see as polarizing. And secondly, the upper caste Muslim, Ashraf Muslims, since they are not socially and educationally backward, they have always contested their inclusion within the social justice policies. The third is political representation. So if you look at the data from 1st to 13th Lok Sabha, the upper caste Muslim, their population is 2.01%, while the representation in the Lok Sabha has been 4.5%. So the moment you disaggregate the data, the political data around political representation in caste terms within Muslims, it becomes very clear that 10% of Pasmanda Muslims, they only corner 0.8% of parliamentary seats, and 2% of Ashraf Muslims, they are cornering 4.5% of parliamentary seats. And if you extend this logic in employment, if you extend this logic in higher education, you'll find approximately similar data sets. So all Muslims are a differential community. The upper caste Muslims are more or less represented, sometimes overrepresented in the key power sectors, in the key decision-making centers, while the lower are absolutely marginalized. I'll just end. Then there is the question of solidarity, where the Pasmanda Muslims, they are seeking a solidarity of pan-religion lower caste, and the slogan is Dalit Pichla Ek Saman, Hindu ho ya Musliman. So all Dalits backwards are alike, whether they be Hindu or Muslim. And there is a strong animus against the use of the term minority. So Pasmanda Muslims, they challenge this majority-minority binary because it obfuscates more than it reveals. So you place 6,000 communities, 6,000 caste groups into two terms, Hindu and Muslim, and develop a politics around the Hindu-Muslim divide. There are two important struggles, conceptual and political struggles overall, which the Pasmanda as a political subject is confronting. One is of Islam as a monolithic and egalitarian religion. So in that sense, Pasmanda is seen as a suspect political subject, as a divisive political subject within the Muslims, within the area of minority studies, within the area of Muslim studies. So Pasmanda is seen as a divisive figure, one who is challenging or dividing the so-called Muslim community. So that is one. Second, when it comes to the Dalit studies or the anti-caste movements, because caste is seen as a Hindu phenomena, so again, the political demands of the lower caste, Dalit, Adivasi, and backward Muslims, they are seen as diluting or encroaching on the rights of the Hindu, Buddhist, or Sikh lower caste. So Pasmanda is a suspect subject because it is still struggling to struggling for legitimacy in the public sphere, and it confronts this notion of encroaching the rights of the Dalits and the rights and dividing the Muslim community on the other hand. And both these struggles can be located in the colonial knowledge and governance strategies. And the Pasmanda movement is trying to create a broad democratic politics which goes beyond the majority minority, Hindu, Muslim, secular, communal, Islamophobia, Islamophilia dyad. And this, the Pasmanda movement feels, is important for a robust democracy in India. Muslimness or untouchability, they are not monolithic experiences. Untouchability and Muslimness or Hinduness, they are experienced differently by different sections. And if we take Baba Saheb's notion of graded inequality seriously, then we have to have a strategy of democratic politics which goes beyond the confines of the existing dominant binaries like the Hindu-Muslim, majority-minority, secular communal, or Islamophilia binaries. I will stop here. I'll respond if there are any questions. Thank you.
This is a definitely great ending for our 3 lectures that we've had. Oh, Anu also has her video on now. Finally, all of us can see her. So if any of you have questions, you can raise your hand and we will make sure that you can unmute yourself. But before that, I have certain questions to all the speakers. To Dr. Teltumbde, I was wondering if you can throw some light on the subcategorization of caste that recently happened, and if you can tell us about your views on that and how that is related to the project of Hindutva or neoliberalism in whatever way you do think. And to Anuradha, I was wondering, yes, Indian prisons are like, the popular understanding is that Indian prisons are supposed to uphold justice. But you are saying that it perpetuates caste system by showing how there are like, divisions within the prison house, for instance. And so what do you think is the alternative, given your experience and you've been talking to these ordinary prisoners? And to Dr. Ansari, because you were also cut short on that, and I'm very curious to know, would you elaborate a little bit more on Pasmanda people's understanding of secularism? And there's one mention that you've also made, which is you said that the representation of Pasmandas in powerhouses like parliament, for instance, or legislative assemblies is not so proportional. In that case, so I was just wondering, would you think representation would really make a difference, or is there something more that you were trying to talk about it when you were saying that?
Dr. Teltumbde, I'm sorry, you're muted. Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay. I was asking whether to start now or wait for other questions. Yeah.
You can start now, and then we can take more
asked about-
questions after these are answered.
All right. You asked about subcategorization. I have already written 3 articles on subcategorization, and even earlier I used to comment on this thing. But on Leaflet, there is one article, or maybe yesterday or today, Wire carried one article which I wrote in response to my friend Shivsundar's article. So that has got link. So probably one could go to the articles and Leaflet as well as scroll.in. Subcategorization basically has been historically the demand no, it's been a move of RSS BJP combined. So that needs to be understood. It's not just Supreme Court's judgment. And Supreme Court judgment also it's serendipitous in that sense, whether it is one may not say so, but it actually helps these the RSS BJP agenda. as a matter of fact, that's very constitutionally speaking, it is absolutely wrong. Okay, I would say that. I don't have an hesitation to say that, although it is a majority judgment, etc., etc. But there is the problem needs to be acknowledged. Okay, and that is embedded in the reservation system itself. The policy, the way it was formulated, it is embedded because whosoever has a starting advantage will keep on grabbing the reservation benefits, and this is what has happened. So it is not a very big logic that one has to use. So something like most populous caste, which can be taken as Ambedkarite caste, had an initial advantage of kind in sense that these castes, because they could not be accommodated in a village system by their vocations, they were always enterprising, they were always outgoing. Okay, so whenever the opportunities came in colonial times, for instance, in military and all that, so they grabbed it. Education, they grabbed it. They urbanization, they grabbed it. So they had a kind of advantage to begin with, and they would be more visible. The argument that of equality, etc., across castes is quite flawed. The people do not understand that equality, etc., cannot be just measured by an average. That could be something like constituted with statistical fallacy of statistical averages. Unless you simultaneously talk about a variance, the picture is not clear. So these are the technical flaws in the argument of other side. While I concede that this is approximately fact, that minor castes have been excluded from that, they do not just reach nearer, and they need to be given. So how does one devise a solution? So I, for instance, have been advocating such kind of solution for this thing. I do acknowledge the problem, although I do not know what is the average and what is the variance of all these castes. That depends upon the data being available. But as many other people sense, I do also acknowledge that there is a problem. So how does one address it? It could be addressed with again the same kind of basic fallacy in reservation system, that reservation is given in the name of caste, but actually benefit the individual and individual's immediate family, not even extended family, not even it goes to his brothers and sisters. So that being the case, then family becomes a basic unit, and you can formulate a system wherein if a person has availed any reservation, then you can actually make it granular. What kind of reservation, what kind, whether it is professional course, whether it is non-professional course, whether it is A, B, C, D class of service or whatever it is. That is a matter of mechanics, details. So that could be worked out. And you give a point so that if a person has availed it, the chances of actually getting reservation next time is dampened. Okay, it is not something like a creamy layer argument, etc., because it is again a flawed argument. Just because one has got a reservation, etc., he could not be deleted. Okay, and reservation does not have anything to do with backwardness. The scheduled caste list was totally conceived in terms of on a sole criteria of untouchability, and that's it. When it was conceived basically by the survey, the colonial rulers, that time the list was closed. It is a mischief that it was opened in constitution during constitution making. Okay, and it became sort of it created a space for politics. So these are the lot of things can be said about, and what my arguments are actually documented in many ways. One of the books like Republic of Caste gives, for instance, a big chapter on reservation, and I have elaborated all these kinds of problems. The reservation policy, as it is extant, is very mischievous. It actually provided a scope for weaponization of reservation for the political purpose. So this needs to be taken into account while discussing the subcategorization. It is not the either or kind of thing, and that is that kind of issue is dealt with in this the latest Wire Act too.
Thank you. Anu and Dr. Ansari.
Shall I
Anu?
speak or Dr. Ansari
You
speaking?
can go ahead.
I just have a few things to say about your question. As I earlier said, the first step would be definitely change in the rule book. Other things can be this way. See, practically for the ordinary prisoners, it's very difficult. So suppose they actually pay wages to the convicted prisoners for any labor that is done in the prison. So all the menial jobs should carry higher wages. That way, they can opt. Other people also can opt. And actually, this remission facility is also there. So whoever actually do labor, they will get remission in their, a period of punishment like. So if those who do menial jobs, if they get higher remission also, people will definitely opt for it. So those type of things should be carried on in the prison. To some, at least to start with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dr. Ansari.
Yeah, so this, if you look at the communal discourse and communal or right-wing politics in Muslims and Hindus, so most of it is most of these organizations and the discourses, they are articulated and dominated by the privileged caste sections. So, for instance, Hindu Mahasabha is established by Veer Savarkar, who is a Brahmin and atheist, and so on and so forth. If you look at the Jamaat-e-Islami, which worked for Islamic State, still works broadly. It was established by Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi, right? So Brahmins in the Hindu Mahasabha and Sayyids in the Jamaat-e-Islami. Even if you look at the present constitution of the Jamaat-e-Islami or the BJP and RSS, you'll find an over-representation of the higher class sections there. So while it is clear that the communal discourses are largely articulated and circulated by the right-wing upper class sections, it is pitched often that the secular forces will be able to contest communalism. So the experience of the Pasmanda has not been that. So even the secular forces, secular organizations, secular articulations, they are also dominated by Dvija and Ashraf scholars and intellectuals. And the communal discourse is also dominated by the Dvija and Ashraf narratives. So when we come to the so one becomes the perpetrator, and then the secular space, they become the savior of the Muslims, while having no impact on the ground at all, right? So Pasmanda, and also so Ali Anwar, he uses the word bhay dohan, profiteering from fear. Bhay means fear, dohan, so profiteering from fear. So the secular parties and secular organizations, again, like I said, so they profiteer from the fear among Muslims vis-a-vis the Hindutva politics. So again, there is a vote bank created here where the Muslims have no choice but to choose secular parties, secular organizations, and so on and so forth. While the right-wing Hindutva, it creates that culture of fear. So we have perpetrators, communal perpetrators at one hand, secular liberators, saviors on the other hand, without any change on violence in the ground. So the lynchings continue unabated. When you look at litigation, there are hardly any justice done to the Muslims who have been lynched. Most of them were Pasmanda Muslims. So again, and this culture of fear, it creates a Muslim vote bank for the secular parties, which is framed as Muslim appeasement by the right-wing Hindutva forces. So again, if you look at who is being appeased within Muslims, it is the small microscopic section, the Ashraf Muslims, that are actually being appeased. So there has been appeasement of Muslims, but appeasement of the Ashraf sections, not the Muslims as such. So in that sense, there is a struggle in the Pasmanda mobilizations to pitch their politics beyond the secular and communal binary. So that is on secularism. In terms of representation, okay, so I mean, just like the anti-caste discourse in general, representation is one element, representation of power structures in decision-making structures. But then in order to have a robust democracy, you need to have a number of other interventions, caste census, some data for robust policy making, land reforms, equality of opportunity, common schooling system, common health system, the minimizing the gulf between the organized sector jobs and the unorganized sector jobs, and so on and so forth. So representation, it is very clear what Pasmanda is saying, that among the Muslims, it is the elite who are overrepresented or adequately represented in the power structures, whether in the parliament, judiciary, or in the bureaucracy, while 85% of Pasmanda Muslims, they are not. So they are hugely underrepresented. And if you look at data, they are probably one of the most underrepresented sections in India.
Thank you so much. We have some questions in the chat box. I can read them out.
I think, yeah. So the first one.
So the first one is to Dr. Teltumbde, and this is from Apanderaj. I'm sorry if I'm not, pronouncing your name properly. The question is, subcategorization of reservation to Arundhati caste in Dalits has been given in Tamil Nadu since 2009. How do you see in the support given by Dravidian government to subcategorization? This is to Dr. Teltumbde. We will take a lot of questions now. And then the next question we have is to Dr. Ansari. You said that Hindu fundamentalism and Muslim fundamentalism have to be fought equally. Don't you think that it's time to deconstruct this binary also, as one has to recognize that it is fascism that is prevalent in India, not communalism, where you make this binary? It is asking Muslims to be the moderate Muslims and fit in the definition of Indian secularism. And Shrishti has a question to Dr. Ansari again. Could you talk more on how Pasmanda movement strives for progressive equity, ensconced in anti-caste rhetoric and action? Also, how is Hindu national homogenization acting towards this significant movemental impulse from below, cutting through it with communal discourse? These are the questions on chat box, but we have some hands raised. We'll go to Vindhya first.
Oh, yeah. I think we'll first let the speakers answer these questions.
Okay.
And then after these, we'll move to the people who have their hands raised. And then after that, we'll come back to the chat box towards the end, if that's okay.
Dr. Teltumbde, you are muted.
Okay, we can hear you.
Now we can hear you.
No, I'm aware of Arundhati as being given the subcategorization in 2009, and it's okay. It's a fait accompli, so it's all right. The 13 years they have been sort of given. Now it is a matter of check as to whether what kind of benefit have accrued to them, whether they have been kind of consuming their quota and all those kinds of things. I do not know the data on that, but the kind of solution that I proposed probably would help them much bigger way than otherwise. Okay, it's not that the reservation does not come just by actually creating a sub quota, but there is overall kind of development also, something like they have to reach that prescribed qualification, their background, their economic background, all those kinds of things comes into picture. And I would say that all these reservations should have been given as something like an exceptional policy, after taking care of the universal kind of provision of basic ingredients to all population, then only it becomes meaningful. Because just creating something like 16 or 15% quota of SC, and giving their share of population to them, probably that might not be getting used even. I do know from closer angles the situation of Arundhatiyas is very dire. They do need some kind of help, but just by creating a subcategorization quota does not mean that entire community develops. Again, it will be coming as something like a demand from subcategorization later on, that only the forward sections among these Arundhatiyas will keep on grabbing that quota, and rest of the people would fall behind. So it's the same kind of perpetuating the problem.
Thank you so much. And the next question was for Dr. Ansari. Would you like me to repeat, or do you remember the question?
No, I remember. It was only the second question by Srishti that I could not follow because it is very thickly worded. It's very complex. Let me come to the first question, which is around the relationship of Hindu fundamentalism and Muslim fundamentalism. So two things. One, I'm not saying that Hindu fundamentalism and Muslim fundamentalism, they have the same firepower. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying they are co-constituted. So Hindu fundamentalism and Muslim fundamentalist discourse, they are symbiotic, they co-constitute each other. The Hindu fundamentalism draws its energy, draws its fuel from Muslim communalist, Muslim fundamentalist ideology. That is all that is being said here. So no one is saying that Hindu fundamentalism and Muslim fundamentalism are equal or share the same firepower. So if you go to Pakistan, obviously Muslim fundamentalism will be much more stronger when compared to Hindu fundamentalism. In Bangladesh, Muslim fundamentalism will be much more stronger than Hindu fundamentalism. And in India, the Hindu fundamentalism has much more firepower than Muslim fundamentalism. But I'm simply saying that these discourses, Hindutva discourse or Islamist discourse, they cannot be constituted without the other. And that other is, say, for instance, in India, that other is the Muslim fundamentalism. So if you have to displace Hindutva discourse, you have to equally challenge Muslim and Hindu fundamentalism. So that is all that is being said. And in terms of violence, whether it is fascist violence, communal violence, whatever term you give it, the victims of that violence are Pasmanda Muslims. The majority of victims are Pasmanda Muslims. Now, third, what should be our response? This notion that we are talking about making Muslims moderate. So again, my question is, if you imagine yourself to be practicing democratic politics, then what should your response be to a fascist regime or to a strong communal regime? So instead of any ultra radical interventions, I would still imagine that we should follow the democratic vocabulary in responding to these forces, which is mass mobilization, opinion formation, and so on and so forth, which has been traditionally practiced by the Ambedkarites, the Gandhians, and so on, right? So that would be my response to the first question. Srishti, can you repeat your question again? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're gonna ask Srishti to just unmute herself and explain it, if that would be easier.
Or if you can repeat the question.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, you can repeat the question, or I can give you permission right now.
We can just repeat.
Okay, I could unmute myself. So for Dr. Ansari, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how this movement of Pasmanda Muslims look like, within which they are ensconcing anti-caste rhetoric and trying to look for progressive equity for peoples across the communal lines, and how the right-wing Hindutva discourse of communalism preys upon such progressive, solidarity-based mass mobilization?
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the social justice or representation strategies, so one move is to de-link caste from religion and see caste as a category which is related more to political economy, and caste as a dynamic category which interlocks itself with religion, gender, region, political economy, state, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, the idea is that caste operates along across religions. So, and there is a long-standing domination of religious identity, which is a hegemonic category, and to launch a counter-hegemonic move against this overarching notion of religion as the primary category. Now, how it translates into social justice politics is, so if you look at the OBC, SC, and ST category, for instance, the recent subclassification debate, it is just one more chapter related to the question of internal justice in these categories. So if you look at the 70 years of India's social justice journey, then when we talk about OBCs, we are talking about 2,500 castes. When we talk about SCs and STs, we talk about 800 to 1,100 groups. And it is very clear that there are some sections within the SC, ST, and OBCs, because of historic reasons, because the first past the post system is much more sensitive to large numbers and other reasons. There are certain communities in the SC, ST, and OBC communities that have been able to negotiate democracy better than most other communities. And so there is also a question of internal justice within the SC, ST, and OBC. And there have been demands from many sections within the Adivasis, within the SCs, within the STs, which have talked about subclassification, which have talked about categorical revisions. And the Pasmanda Muslims are also can be seen as one making some justice claims with the others, right? So in the case of OBC, we already have a Rohini Commission, which is looking into the subclassification at the level of central OBC list. In various states, there are various commissions. So Hukum Singh Commission and the recent Raghuendra Singh Commission in UP, it is looking at subclassification in OBCs in Uttar Pradesh, and so on and so forth. So Pasmanda Muslims are saying, number one, that club similarly place caste groups across religions in categories. So for instance, if you are creating 3 categories within the OBC, then don't create a separate category for Muslims or Christians or any other faith, but create subcategories based on socioeconomic class lines, and then place the Pasmanda Muslims and other communities, similarly placed communities, in a common category. So they're asking for and similarly for the ST category. In the case of scheduled caste category, if you look at all the other social justice categories, whether it is OBC, ST, or EWS, they are religiously neutral categories. So EWS, the Ashraf Muslims are included in the economically weaker sections. The upper caste Ashraf Muslims are included. In the OBC, the backward Muslims are included. In the scheduled tribe, the Adivasi Muslims are included. But SC is the only category which is not religiously neutral for historical reasons. And many Dalit Muslims and Dalit Christians, they have gone to the Supreme Court. They have petitioned the Supreme Court to look into this matter and make the SC category also religiously neutral, similarly to the OBC and other categories. So in terms of social justice, that is what the Pasmanda Muslims are arguing with other sections within the SC, ST, and OBCs, which can be seen to be the non-vanguard caste, right? Those castes which are microscopic, which are extremely marginalized, and they are not in a position to negotiate with democracy in the way certain castes have done historically. Yeah, so on social justice, that would be my point. Is there any, there was something else?
Yeah, so I can read out the next question in the chat.
Yeah.
So it was for Dr. Ansari again. Shazia Hassan asks, you spoke about the Pasmanda challenging the Muslim League creation of the Muslim state on the grounds of centering Nawabi or Ashrafi interests. What did that challenging look like on the ground?
Yeah, so on the ground, obviously, from 1940s, after the Lahore Declaration, the All India Movement Conference, it challenged the Muslim League. In 1946 provincial elections, where Muslim League won handsomely because of a restricted franchise. So we all know there was no universal adult franchise at that point of time in 1946, and only Muslims and even others were allowed to vote on the basis of their education, their wealth, their ability to pay taxes, and so on and so forth. And the estimates from most political scientists and historians is that probably within Muslims, 10 to 14% of Muslims could vote in the 1946 provincial elections. And most of these 10 to 15% Muslims who voted, because of the relationship between caste and class, it looks like they would be Ashraf Muslims, and they voted in favor of Muslim League. In the 1946 elections, at least in Bihar, there were 40 seats. There was a separate electorate at that point of time. Out of 40 seats, 34 were won by Muslim League, and 5 seats, I think, were won by the All India Muslim Movement Conference, which challenged the Muslim League in the 1946 elections. So there is a sense that Pakistan largely was the entire notion of partition. It was largely articulated by the elite Ashraf Muslims and the Dujas on the other side because of various historical and complicated reasons, while the lower caste Muslims, they, especially their organizations, they challenged this movement. They worked closely with Gandhi. For instance, the weaving class in North India, because of the Gandhian symbolism of the charkha, the spinning. Most Muslims, they work, lower caste Muslims, the weaving caste and other caste, lower caste, they worked closely with Congress and Gandhi against the politics of partition.
Yeah, I think, Amna, I'll let you ask your question now.
Hi, thank you, Professor Ansari. My question is for, thank you to all the presenters, and my question is to Dr. Ansari. I have 2 questions. One is that I examine caste in Tamil Nadu. I look at caste among Tamil Muslims, and which is a place where I found an exception to this practice in general in the subcontinent. So I was wondering what are the things that you have observed in the context of Tamil Nadu? And my second question is about when you mentioned about Tablighi Jamaat and the revivalist movements. One of the things ethnographers have noticed about these movements is they tend to be very opaque. It's very difficult to do ethnographic study within them. So how do we understand those operations, like ethnographically? One is like you can actually be a participant, but what have been like your observations in that end?
Yeah, so again, when we come to the South Indian states, if you look, and Tamil Nadu, I'm not much aware of Tamil Nadu, but Kerala, I have some experience, Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana, even Lakshadweep, I have some experience. But Tamil Nadu, my only experience so far has been that there is a Urdu-speaking elite class in Tamil Nadu. And there is this notion that Sayyids are superior. That is very much there in Tamil Nadu. Why? I mean, so one of my positions is that caste among Muslims is everywhere, even in South Indian states. But the experience of caste does not mean that there is also a simultaneous articulation of anti-caste politics, right? Sometimes the experience might be there, but a robust articulation is not there because of various reasons. So if you look at North India, then because of the migration of many elite Muslims to Pakistan, West Pakistan or East Pakistan, so the grip of Ashraf hegemony in North India was slightly diluted when compared to South India, where very few migrations happened among Muslims. So in South India, the hegemony of Ashraf Muslims, particularly the Sayyids as a class, is much more stronger when compared to North India. Among other things, this could be one reason why in North India there has been an articulation of anti-caste Muslim politics in the form of Pasmanda movement, while South India is lagging behind. There are discussions happening now in Kerala. For instance, there was a recent controversy where a person from the Osan community, the Muslim barber community, he was suspended from a local mosque community because the constitution of the mosque itself made it very clear that members of the Osan community cannot be formal members. So this Osan boy, the boy from Osan community, it attended a general body meeting of the mosque and he was reprimanded for that. So there was some discussion around that. In Lakshadweep, there is also this notion of this idea of Malayali hegemony, where the Koya Muslims and the elite Muslims from Kerala, they dominate the Lakshadweep power structures. And the indigenous Adivasi, also Muslims, so they feel that they are being culturally colonized in the terms of Malayalam language imposed on them, different cultural practices imposed on them. And there were some strikes by the coconut lower caste Muslim workers against the landholding, against the dominant Koyas, the Muslim Koyas, right? So in Andhra and Telangana also, there is a lot of experience which is which has been captured in terms of popular poetry and so on of lower caste Muslims. Tamil Nadu, I'm not very sure because Tamil Nadu, I have little experience of Tamil Nadu. And if you say it is an exception, so one needs some discussion on that. Why is that so? What are the kind of communities that are there? But again, my very limited experience of visiting Chennai a few times, talking to people there, has been that there is some sense of caste-based distinctions. But whether that those distinctions are experienced in terms of hierarchy in the public sphere, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, so this will be our last question for the day since we only have 3 minutes left. And yeah, I want to apologize to those who couldn't get a chance to ask, but you can email us and we'll try our best to get it answered. So the last question was from Vidya Shankar, and it's open to all speakers, particularly Anu and Dr. Ansari. Can you share any organizations that are already working towards solidarity, example among communal groups as well as between anti-caste and abolitionist movements?
So who is the question directed towards? Is it towards Professor Teltumbde?
Yeah, it's open for all speakers.
Okay.
I don't think there is any organization or movement which is actually working for abolition of caste or communities. There are small groups which are of that viewpoint, and they have been dragging, but they are too small. You know, there is no something like coordination between them to have something like impact. Yeah, Dr. Ansari, you can add to that.
Yes, so I would concur with your view that the state of anti-caste politics is rather pessimistic, very dismal. And instead of the broader emancipatory or transformative annihilation of caste project, we have on the ground, we have much more integrationist movements, which view anti-caste politics from their own caste pigeonholes. And the larger picture, the question of democratic transformation is usually lost. And like Professor Teltumbde already mentioned during his intervention, there's a lot of co-option happening. So of the lower caste sections by the present regime. So for instance, even the Pasmanda, the PM Modi mentioned the term Pasmanda from the Red Fort for the first time. And the BJP and RSS, they're trying to appropriate the Pasmanda discourse as well. But obviously, there are people who see through that. There are people in all communities which have some commitments to democracy. They are minor voices at this point of time, but we should be hopeful that we will get our act together and bring and forge larger solidarities of the subaltern classes in future. That is a hope, and in any case, we should be hopeful because we have to invent hope. Otherwise, there's nothing left for us. Yeah.
Sure.
In Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, actually, one organization is working, Kula Nirmulana Porat Samiti, which actually translates to annihilation. I mean, organization, struggling organization for the annihilation of caste, something to that. Though it is actually a statewide organization, but with limited forces and all, but still they're working both in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And if you could just type out the name in the chat, that would be great, just so people who missed it can look it up if they want to.
Yeah, I think I can send that.
Yeah, if you know that,
Yeah.
do that. Just making sure.
All right. I think we have come to the end of our lecture series, and I would like to thank all of you for joining the first session of our inaugural lecture series. I'm extremely grateful to the speakers for joining despite their hectic schedule and Anu on such a short notice. I hope the very few Purdue students who joined us today had learned something about the dynamics of caste in India and how caste, class are crucial deciding factors in everyday politics. The issues raised and flagged today are about the caste-based labor practices inside prison, the instrumental use of Bahujans and Dalits to make a united Hindu identity vis-a-vis a Muslim identity, the impact of neoliberalism on lower caste groups, and the fact that lower caste Muslim groups are the target of Hindutva and right-wing Islamist movements, making caste an important issue in the struggle against right-wing movements overall. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to see you all and for joining us. And I hope we can see every one of you, including the speakers, on our later events on September 22 and October 6. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just to add a word, thank you to our speakers, and seeing your smiling faces, it really gives us more motivation to keep up the work and keep trying and reach more people.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, and take care, everyone, and have a good week.